Welcome to episode 2 of Simplify Your Setup, where we look for ways to help make things simpler and easier for musicians and sound engineers. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at digital wireless mixers and how you can reduce the amount of gear and cables by switching from an analog mixing desk to a wireless digital mixer. Okay, here's a scenario. Let's say you have a full band and you're looking to play live and you require around 16 XLR channels to support all the audio sources. For that, you're going to need a mixer that supports that many channels. You're also going to need a table or a desk for that mixer to sit on. Now, you could have that mixer sit on the side of the stage, but it's pretty impractical for a sound engineer. So the next thing you need to get is a snake, sometimes called a stage box or a multi-core box or a multi-core snake. For the rest of this video, I'm just going to call it a snake. Now, that snake is going to run cables from your stage to the mixer, but it also needs to support the same amount of channels as the mixer, in this case, 16 channels. You may not need that many channels, so keep in mind that the requirements for your band will determine the budget you're working with. Fewer channels means you could opt for a smaller mixing desk and a snake with fewer channels, but the more channels you need, the more money you're going to have to fork out. On top of that, the distance you want the mixing desk from the stage depends on how long the snake is, and the longer you go, the more it costs. Now, let's also say your band wouldn't mind recording some demos or recording the performances live, or maybe you want to record in a home studio or rehearsal space. For that, you might want to also invest in an audio interface so that you can mix and edit on a digital audio workstation. And again, the bigger the band, the more channels you need on the audio interface, sometimes needing at least 2 or more. Well, you could actually have all of what I just listed by using a digital wireless mixer. So rather than buying several items at various prices, just buy one that does the job of all of them. Now, there are several brands and types that you can go for, but the one that I have is a Mackie DL16s. And it's the best investment I have made for myself and the bands that I work with. I keep mine locked in a Roadcase along with everything that I need, so it's literally a grab and go item. The only thing you need to be aware of is that these types of mixers do require some sort of digital device like a tablet or a laptop, and sometimes just a cell phone. But since most people already have those devices in their home, you're not really going to have to go out and buy another one. Let's take a look at what's inside this Roadcase and how I use it to make my mixing and live setups easier. So here it is on the front with the cables unplugged, and I'll explain some of the features of it. The unit is a mixer and a stage box and an audio interface, and it can sit on relatively most flat surfaces, or you can mount it into a rack unit or Roadcase. You will want to set this up on stage, behind the stage, or the side of the stage. It doesn't really matter. The mixing part is done digitally through the Mackie Master Fader app on a tablet or a laptop, which is then connected to the Mackie wireless mixer through its built-in Wi-Fi antenna. The one downside of all the DL mixer lines from Mackie is the design flaw of including a Wi-Fi antenna that only supports 2.4 GHz Wi-Fi band, which causes frequent disconnections due to an overcrowded Wi-Fi band. However, the solution around this is to use an external 5 GHz router, which I have done, and I'll show you more on this shortly. There are 16 XLR inputs to choose from, as well as 8 XLR outputs. 6 of these outputs are auxiliary sends, and the last 2 are the main left and right outputs. There's also a stereo headphone monitor with volume control, but I have no use for this yet, although someone else might. The first row of inputs are XLR inputs, while the second row are dual XLR and 1/4-inch jack inputs. The Mackie DL16s has a USB port to allow you to connect a laptop and use this mixer as an audio interface, all 16 channels. You can also use it as a return to playback audio from your laptop. Since the built-in Wi-Fi on this mixer is so unreliable, I opted for using my own external router, which I plug into this Ethernet port. Sometimes I'll have to use a phone or other device to play back music, So I use an auxiliary cable here that runs to the back of the Roadcase into a 3.5mm mini jack connector. Depending on the gig, I might be using 4 wireless microphones, so I use these 4 XLR connectors on the front, which then run to the back of the Roadcase into a wireless receiver. I also have these 4 connectors for the auxiliary sends, which I send to an additional in-ear monitor transmitter if I need it for the gig. Now let's take a look over to the back of the Roadcase and take a look at what's inside. As I said before, I assembled this Roadcase to be a grab and go item. So inside I have a whole bunch of items, and I know it looks pretty messy and cluttered, but it all sits pretty snug and secure inside, and it doesn't get knocked around at all. I have 2 Android tablets, but this mixer will also work with iPads as well. I have 2 so that one is charging and the other one is in use. Or one is given to a band member to adjust monitor levels while I'm out the front mixing. There's an external router specifically for using the 5 GHz band for a more stable connection. And I also have here the other ends of the USB and Ethernet cable that you would have seen in the front of the Roadcase. And here I have the other ends of the auxiliary cable from the front going into a 3.5mm mini jack for separate audio devices. I would love to be able to buy a rack mountable power conditioner, but for now I'm just using a multi-power box with USB ports, and it works perfectly for what I need, so I'll just stick with this for now. I have 3 separate battery chargers which I use for the wireless mics and in-ear monitors. There's usually always something charging at a gig so that it's ready to go. There's also plenty of USB ports for charging tablets, phones and other devices for myself and for the band members. I also keep handy some spare USB cables for the tablets that I use. If I move all the items out of the way, you can see that the Roadcase is quite deep with extra space, which is why I'm able to store all these items inside it. Lastly, on the back we have the 4-channel wireless mic receiver, which is already connected to the front of the Mackie DL16s. Here's how I typically set up my rack unit for a gig. After taking off the front and back covers, all my cables and connectors on the front are already plugged in, ready to go. I then take the items from the back and start connecting them into power sources. I start off with the Wi-Fi router plugging in the power and the Ethernet cable. Depending on the gig, I might want to record the live show or record a band practice in Logic by connecting the USB cable to my MacBook. Again, depending on the gig, I might want to use the laptop to playback audio from Logic or from Spotify or other media using the 3.5mm mini jack connector. From here on, I'll probably start plugging in XLR cables in the front of the mixer for the band, like the drums, the guitar, the bass, keyboard, microphones. And lastly, I power up the Mackie DL16s mixer and launch the Master Fader app on the tablets and then start mixing. I'll make a separate video on how to use some of the features of the app, but generally that's how quick and easy the setup is. There's no need to unravel a snake, there's no need to plug ends of the snake into an analog mixing desk and then having to plug a whole bunch of XLRs into the snake box on the stage. It's all done through this mixer. When it comes to packing up, it's just as easy and quick. I unplug the XLR cables from the front of the mixer except for the ones I leave permanently in. I unplug the USB cable and the 3.5mm mini jack from the MacBook and fold down the front antennas. I then power off the mixer as well as the external Wi-Fi router and unplug the power cable and Ethernet cable from it. I then pack away the router back into its box and place the front cover on the Roadcase and then move on to the back of the Roadcase. I'll save my mixes in the app and power off the tablets and then start doing some cable management, basically unplugging a few things and keeping everything tidy and untangled. Next, I'll place the Multibox powerboard and the Wi-Fi router box into the Roadcase and then the tablets on top of the router box. I'll then coil up the remaining cables like the USB, Ethernet and auxiliary cables and then tuck them into the remaining space. Lastly, I'll put the back of the cover onto the Roadcase, which the front and back is also padded, and I am done. This wireless mixer has made setups faster, has made my mixers smoother to work with, given me the ability to save my mixers and create new ones for bands and others. I hope this was helpful and kind of makes sense as to why this kind of mixer will help simplify your setups. If you're not sure about anything, please leave a comment and let me know. I'll also make a separate video to show you the Mackie Master Fader app and some of its features, because there is so much to cover in it. Be sure to check it out. I'll add the link in the description for you when it's ready. Thanks for tuning in.